So this morning, we're very happy to have with us Ryushin Jan Freier, who's a longtime practitioner who started practicing at MZMC in 1985. He received jukai there in 1988 and worked as tenzo and other mostly kitchen-related jobs until 1994. He attended Clouds-in-Water Zen Center for a couple of years, starting in 2002. In 2016, he became a member of both the Hokyoji and Compassionate Ocean Dharma centers. He gives Dharma talks at Compassionate Ocean when invited. Today, Ryushin will talk on, I can't say this name very well, but it's the third patriarch. Can you pronounce his name?
In Japanese, it's Sosan. So we all know Sosan, so we'll just go with Sosan.
Okay, so Sosan, about a wonderful sutra, Faith in the Non-Dual Heart/Mind. Ryushin has provided 2 links, which I will put into the chat box shortly. One is a PDF of the third patriarch's teaching that you may want to look at, and the other is an illustrated recitation of the teaching by Ram Dass. So put those links in the chat box. If you have any trouble saving them, if you want to let me know just by emailing Hokyoji, and I'll make sure you get them. All right, take it away, Ryushin.
I'm very grateful to have been able to work with this text for a while now. I took a weekend workshop with Reverend Angel Kyodo Williams at Upaya on this text. Before that, I only knew the first stanza of this text, and I always assumed it was part of a koan. And Dokai referenced it sometime in October or November, and then I found out it was a longer text, and then I found out Upaya was having a workshop on it, and I really wanted to look into it because it's a really startling kind of text. And as a sidelight, this morning when I was getting my warm winter clothes on, I looked at the label of my long sleeve t-shirt, and it said, "Live unconditionally." And I thought, whoa, that's so weird, because what am I talking about today? I'm talking about living unconditionally. That's what this poem talks about. But it's a trademark of Champion dual fold underwear. Live unconditionally. So just bear that in mind. So when Reverend Angel gave this weekend, she talked about this text for 8 to 10 hours. So I don't think we're going to cover all of that. This is going to be a very brief introduction, and it's a very rich text. There's a lot going on, and as a rich text, I think it's important to have some background on it. So one thing that happens is it's Chinese, so there's 3 characters that make up the title. So everybody has different translations, even of the title. Reverend Angel's translation of the title was "Faith Beyond Duality, Trust and Belonging in Your Own Heart." So belonging is a big theme in her work, but it's basically, there's many different translations of even the title. So if we look at I want to look at the title. I want to show you the title here. So as you see, this little vertical with a line on the top, that's a person. This little box at the bottom represents a mouth. These little lines above that represent words. So this is something, a man who stands by his words. So this is commonly translated as faith or trust. It's this kind of integrity that this man, this person, and the words are one thing. So you can trust in these words. So that's an implication even for the text. You can trust in these words. And then the second character, this is a representation that's translated as Shin. Now my Shin on my Rakusu looks very different from this, but this Shin, I'm told, this little line is a representation of heart. And these little lines are representation of like aorta, veins, arteries connecting to the heart. So if there's any doubt about where this text is coming from, when every time it says mind, we have to remember that they're actually talking more aspect of the heart mind than the mind heart. But they capitalize mind, but it's actually, there's no doubt when you look at this that they're talking about something to do with the heart. And this final one is engraving. And again, you see this little box, which is like a mouth. So this engraving or inscription, early Chinese inscriptions were done on tortoise shells. And the whole idea of classic Chinese characters was there's something like 140 different languages across China. So this classic kind of pictographic language that developed that was to kind of unify people to understand each other and to be able to communicate with each other. So this is kind of a engraving, and the engravings, as was explained to me, were kind of admonitions or warnings or kind of postings. So it's like the idea that I got was if you're walking on a multi-use path and you see these little things that the DNR puts up, it says, dogs should only be on a leash 6 feet or less. Slower traffic should walk to the right. When you pass, say on your left, because Confucianism, maintaining the social order, was a very big deal in China. So there were these kind of admonitions posted about how people should behave. So this is like engraving trust in your heart, how we should behave, how we should practice. So we can stand by these words, and we take these words into our heart, and we can engrave these words into our heart. So Kaz Tanahashi's translation of this basically is saying, engrave this trust in your heart. So it's like, well, what trust? What trust? So trust is kind of sometimes it's a noun, sometimes it's a verb. We can trust in these words. So there's historical context of this, as Carl pointed out last week. The Silk Road was bringing Buddhism into China in the 1st century and the 2nd century. By the 300s, people were actually making pretty good translations of Sanskrit and Pali texts. And eventually, there was a burgeoning monastic communities building up in Buddhism. Bodhidharma didn't get to China until like 500. And by that time, Emperor Wu is supporting monasteries. So it was kind of a cycle of supporting Buddhism. And then if they got a little too powerful, people kind of suppressed them. So this Confucianism was really kind of all about maintaining social order. So they didn't especially like the idea of monasteries. So they were kind of resistant because monasteries kind of broke up the family, broke up the obligations to the government, whatever government was local. But Taoists were also around, And there were some Taoists who embraced Buddhism because they kind of run parallel paths. So there was this, especially by the time the third patriarch was around, this text really does kind of bring up a lot of Taoist themes that are really parallel to Buddhism. So I want to read some of what Stanley Lombardo, which is the text that Reverend Angel supplied us with 16 different translations on her resource page. So there's a reason for that, and I'll go into that. But she originally came across this translation in the 1990s. And at one time in like the early 2000s, Dharma Crafts was sending out a little booklet of Stanley Lombardo's translation with anything that you ordered. So this is what the link gives you. So this is a nice little title page, and it's got kind of a Taoist landscape where the fog, this is a kind of Taoist tradition of you never see the whole of anything. If something is present, something is absent, you never see everything. So he gives a little background that I'll give a little more background on, if I can get to it. So here's me trying to read the Chinese name. Zheng Zan was the third Chinese patriarch of Zen, having received transmission from Bodhidharma's successor, Hui Ku. He was suffering from leprosy when he met Hui Ku. He was also 40 years old, which was pretty old at that time in 6th century China. The average age length was like 23 at that time. So he was pretty old, and he'd been living as a leper, homeless, in poverty, begging on the streets. And he wasn't a monk when he went to see the second patriarch. He was just a homeless guy showing up to ask this question. He was suffering from leprosy when he met Hui Ku. The transmission of the lamp records their moment of truth, which echoes Hui Ku's famous encounter with Bodhidharma. Zheng Zan went to Hui Ku and said, "My body is gripped by a fatal disease. Please, Master, wipe away my sins." Hui Ku said, "Bring your sins out here and I will wipe them away for you." Zheng Zan sat for a while and then said, "When I look for my sins, I cannot find them." Hui Ku answered, "I have wiped away your sins." After Zheng Zan received transmission, Buddhism was persecuted in China, and he spent 15 years wandering and hiding in the mountains. Out of all this hard training comes the poem, the first on record attributed to a Chan master. So basically, the second patriarch was impressed with, say, Sosan, and took him on as his attendant. And then when he was ready, he gave him transmission. And as soon as he gave him transmission, he said, "Bad times are coming, you should leave." And then he went and wandered in the mountains for 15 years, basically resuming the homeless and poor, poverty-strewn lifestyle that he had before. He wasn't a monk for long. He was a lay person, and then he was a wanderer. And then from what I understand, the fourth patriarch showed up as a 14-year-old boy to help out. So one of the things the story tells me is just how fragile this whole thing was. How fragile that we even have this linkage to all these people. And at the same time, it's kind of unbreakable. But it's very fragile. This guy was a leper living in poverty, spent a few years understanding and training, and then went off 15 years to live in the mountains. So as Stanley Lombardo says, this is recognized as the first time this poem, this text is recognized as the first thing written by a Chan master in classic Chinese. So it's the first, this is a transition for Buddhism, because Bodhidharma, when he arrived in China, didn't speak Chinese, which may account for why his dialogue with Emperor Wu was so terse. But this is also kind of important that this is the transition into China of moving this way. So there's some details I want to share on the text itself. There's 146 lines, and there are 4 characters on each line. Classic Chinese has 5 to 7 characters. So 4 characters means that the person reading the text, interpreting the text, has to fill in more. If you have 5 to 7 characters, there's more definition of what's going on in that line. With 4 characters, there's less definition. You have to interact more. You have to provide more connectiveness between the characters. And you can see even from the title that these things, these characters really resonate. They bring up a whole lot more than just words do. There's a lot going on, which is why we had 16 translations to look at, but we stuck mostly with the Stanley Lombardo because he tried to follow the kind of terse and unsentimental kind of theme that the third patriarch set. But the other interesting thing to me is that this is really blunt language. That by the time of the Tang Dynasty in like 600s to 700s, Buddhism gets all involved, just like Chinese literature, into metaphors and symbologies and moonlight and darkness and all this stuff that you kind of have to know. There's none of that in this text. It's all just very, very straightforward, very clear. It's not exactly easy text, but it's pretty blunt, which I really appreciate. So in the text, there's 30 sets of opposites. So the idea is, of course, as usual, is we don't want to deal with duality. Duality is misleading. We want to try to point directly to the non-dual. And there's also not as much as the Heart Sutra, but 35 to 40% is negatives. Don't do this, no, not that. So it's like, it's really hard to point to something directly like this without, it's much easier to say the negative side and like you bring the other. It reminds me of my mother telling me, don't hit your brother. And it's like, okay, if I don't hit my brother, what do I do? And it's like, oh, I have to think, what do I do if I don't hit my brother? So that's kind of where we are there. Time is flying by. So eventually, and now we get to the text. I'll read the first page. And so I really, really encourage you to copy the links out of the chat and read this for yourself and listen to Ram Dass speaking this text. The great way is not difficult. Just don't pick and choose. Cut off all likes or dislikes, and it is clear like space. The slightest distinction splits heaven from earth. To see the truth, don't be for or against. Likes and dislikes are the mind's disease. If you miss the deep meaning, it is useless to still your thoughts. It is clear as vast space, nothing missing, nothing extra. If you choose or reject, you cannot see things as they are. Outside, don't get tangled in things. Inside, don't get lost in emptiness. Be still and become one, and confusion stops by itself. So, I'm pretty sure we all grasp that pretty easily, right? So the first thing Reverend Angel told us was, the first line, the great way, it's capitalized. Well, there's no such thing as capitalization in Chinese. But people want to point out this is the great way. Sometimes it's translated as the perfect way. But the way, which is interesting to me, just to start out, she said, when the Taoists talk about way, it's a direction. It's not a route. When we ask how to get someplace in Google Maps, it gives us a step-by-step route. But this is not a step-by-step route. This is a way. So if you ask the way to Philadelphia, basically you get a pointing. Or a compass setting. And so because we're all in different places, our way is going to be different to the way we get there than someone else gets there. The same as these 4 characters get translated by a lot of different people in different ways, depending on where they are. The way is not difficult. Later on, much later on in the text, it says the way is not easy and it's not difficult. So I think that helps a little. It's not easy, but it's not difficult either. Just don't pick and choose. So picking and choosing is something we do all the time. We pick and choose all the time. So when I heard this, I was reminded of a story that I heard, and I think I heard it from Myo-O, but I'm not absolutely sure. But one time on the porch at MZMC, people were passing a plate of cookies or fruit or something, and people at that time at MZMC did not want to make mistakes. So everybody's deliberating over which, we'll call it cookies, which cookie should I take? If I take a small cookie, will I present as unselfish? If I take a large cookie, will I present as selfish? What if I'm really hungry and just being honest and take a large cookie? So there's all this internal deliberation, and it's taking way too long to pass just a tray of cookies around. So I think somebody, maybe Myo-O, asks Tomoe, what should we do? What should we pick? And she says, you pick the nearest. So this is a different orientation of picking and choosing. It's not your criteria. It's the situation. It's the environment you're in. You're looking at what's going on in your space, allowing the space to dictate your criteria. It's not coming from you anymore. It's just this beautiful teaching. If you don't remember anything from this morning, just remember that little story. Because we pick and choose all the time. We can't get away from picking and choosing, but why do we pick and choose? So a lot has been written on Joan Didion lately, and there's this one quote from her marriage that she was married to John Gregory Dunn, who is also a writer. She was a writer, and they, whenever they would be ready to turn something in, they would let the other person read it. So they were their other person's editor. And she said about this marriage, she said, he didn't always think that I was right, and I didn't think that he was always right, but we trusted one another. So this is the same kind of thing that impresses me, that you can, if you want, you can look at the right and wrong. You can look at the duality. You can say, you can put your emphasis on, well, this is right, and this person is wrong. Why are they that? And just put your energy into that. Or you can put your energy into the trust, this kind of thing between two people, this kind of thing in this text with ourselves, this kind of trust in the non-dual. To see the truth, don't be for or against. Likes and dislikes are the mind's disease. There's one translation that says setting up likes and dislikes in contention is the mind's disease. So Reverend Angel, when she talks about this, talks about kind of, it's a matter of emphasis. Which do you trust? Do you trust your ability to find likes and dislikes? If I cut off all likes and dislikes, who exactly am I? It's taken me a lifetime to put together likes and dislikes. There's probably things that I like and dislike that I don't even know about. There's probably a lot of cheeses that I've never eaten that I'm going to have likes and dislikes about. If I take all my likes and dislikes about, who am I? It's an interesting question. Who am I in that point? And so what I get from this text is this whole idea of emphasis. Do we trust our ability to discriminate? Do we trust our ability to pick and choose to get us out of all these situations? Or do we allow ourselves to try to drop those away and see things as they are as best we can and trust in that? Likes and dislikes are the mind's disease. If you miss the deep meaning, it is useless to still your thoughts. So this is pretty blunt language, and this is actually, it kind of hurts. If you miss the deep meaning, it is useless to still your thoughts. Here I thought, this is what we're about. We're about stilling our thoughts. But if we miss the deep meaning, it's useless. So Bernie Glassman's 3 tenets of the Peacekeepers thing is don't mind, bear witness, appropriate action. If you just go to bearing witness, if you just go to stilling your thoughts and paying attention without first going to don't mind, you're only projecting your own likes and dislikes. It's kind of useful to see your likes and dislikes projected, but you're missing the deep meaning of dropping things away, dropping things so that you can see things more clearly. And sometimes we do that voluntarily, and sometimes circumstances do that for us. So that's not much of an introduction. But I also want to bring up this point that comes up several times. Because, we're interested in the stillness. If it's useless to still your thoughts, if you miss the deep meaning, it also says, stop moving to become still, and the stillness will move. If you hold on to opposites, you cannot understand one. So stop moving to become still, and the stillness will move. So if you pursue stillness, what you experience is pursuit. You don't experience stillness. So further on, in that same vein, so these are like practice instructions, but it's not, never does he mention zazen, never does he mention on the cushion or off the cushion. This is just how to live on the cushion and off the cushion. In the mind before thinking, no effort is made. Doubts and worries disappear and faith is restored. In the mind without effort, thinking cannot take root. In the true Dharma world, there is no self or other. In the mind before thinking, no effort is made. Doubts and worries disappear, and faith or trust is restored. In the mind without effort, thinking cannot take root. In the true Dharma world, there is no self or other. So this is all kind of ironic that there's also this line, the more you think and talk, the more you lose the way. So this again is emphasis. I mean, we have to pick and choose. We have to think and talk. But one of the kind of physical things that Reverend Angel provided was sometimes we get too wrapped up and we get this feeling like this. Right? We get so wrapped up in thinking that we don't take a breath. So I have a friend now who's trying to write her dad's obituary, and she's just in that state, trying to do a perfect obituary, and it's impossible. It's just impossible. So take a breath. Just do something. So that's a very, very quick and brief introduction, but I also wanted to shift gears and talk about this idea of effortlessness. This is a concept from kind of Taoism, Wu Wei Wu, effort without effort, doing without doing. So there was a guided meditation by John Dunn. Again, I found out about through Upaya. John Dunn is a Mahamudra and Dzogchen practitioner in Tibetan tradition. He teaches at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. He's one of the all-stars that Upaya brings in. He's quite a character. And he led this guided meditation that had at least as profound an effect on me as this text. And I wanted to share that, and I think this group is somebody I can share that with. So it's not going to be a guided meditation because I don't really feel qualified to do that. It's just going to be an exercise. So, so what he does, as in the Mahamudra tradition, is he does this philosophical analysis, which kind of comes out of Nagarjuna, kind of comes out of asking questions that reveal something. So just settle in, and I'll ask a few questions, and then I'll make a few comments that'll kind of either mislead or lead you, one or the other. So after you settle down, he asks a very simple question. Are you conscious or unconscious? Are you conscious or unconscious? So I have a friend I asked this question to, and because he was a philosophy major, he said, well, that'll take me 15, 20 minutes, but don't overthink this. Just, it's pretty simple. Are you conscious or unconscious? So if you come to the conclusion that you're conscious, is there a sense of a witness? If there's a sense of a witness, is there a need for a witness to witness the witness? And if there's a witness to witness the witness, is there a need for a witness to witness the witness? And once you're tangled up in there, just come back to the question, are you conscious? Because if we add a witness, we're making a construction. And this conscious is already happening. We don't need to make a construction to add to it. So are you conscious or unconscious? And then he asks, how is it? How is it that you are conscious? Not what is consciousness? Don't go there, because that's entangling. But how is it that you are conscious? Just explore that for a few seconds. How is it that you are conscious? And then he asks, is there effort involved in being conscious? Are you having to make effort to be conscious? If you add effort, can you make yourself more conscious? If you add effort, can you make yourself less conscious? How is it that you're conscious? Is there effort involved? Is it your effort that's involved? And then he asks, is it possible to rest in that effortless awareness? Can you find yourself resting in that effortlessness? And to my mind, that relates very directly to what Trust in Mind, this document by the third patriarch, is talking about. There's no duality, there's just this effortless consciousness. Suzuki Roshi sometimes talk about this as a movie screen, where things are projected onto this movie screen, but the movie screen doesn't have any reaction. You can project all kinds of things on the movie screen. The movie screen is just there. But that's kind of it kind of ruins it for me in some ways. I kind of like the John Dunn thing. It just, how are you conscious? So that's my talk for this morning. I would like to hear comments or questions. As usual, I packed a lot of stuff in, and I only got through a few verses. Carl.
Well, thanks for this, Jan. I think about 20 years ago, I had a copy of this poem by, what did you say? There were 30 translations of this or something like that. It was Sheng Yan, some Chinese master had done his own translation. And you brought me back to that. It was, I think it was called Faith in Mind. That's the title of the book. And I remember enjoying it, but I now look back at that and it seems much more Taoist than Buddhist, but that's the way some of the Chinese stuff goes. They merge the two together. It's interesting, but you'll be interested to look at your list and go back over this again. But and it's funny you referenced John Dunn because he's been at Upaya since they were doing those Mind and Life things. He's a pretty interesting guy. But anyway, thanks for your talk. I really enjoyed it this morning. So
it really is a time when Taoism and Buddhism were merging, and it's also a time when Pure Land School was really developing and taking off. So this is like a statement of this is our school. This is what we do. This is what Bodhidharma brought to China. This is ours. This is, and we don't believe in something outside of ourselves. We don't believe in a Pure Land. We believe in something inside. So so it is kind of Taoist, but it's also I think it's also very Buddhist in this non-dualistic kind of pointing directly to true mind, true heart. And at the end it says, trust and mind are not two is trust in mind. And that's kind of very terse. There's better, more connective translations of that. If I can get to them. No, I can't. This whole idea of oneness is also very, very Taoist. It's like, so there's a lot of stuff in there, not two. So it's like, if there's ever any doubt that rises in your mind, just say not two, that I am part of this, whatever's going on, I am in this. I am in this. I am not separate from it. I am in this. It's not two. It's one thing. Hey, Jukai.
Good morning. I just wanted to say that I went to Japan first in 1981, and I wasn't ordained, and there were only a few temples where you could go if you were not ordained person. And one of them that I went to, that I spent the most time at, I probably spent 7 months there. It was just a temple, it wasn't a monastery. But this particular, the abbot of the temple had this other piece of property, like out. The main temple was in Chigasaki, which is about an hour south of Tokyo. And then another 2-3 hours from there by car was it toward Mount Fuji, was this other place. It wasn't a temple. It was kind of like, I don't know what it was, like a daycare center or something. And I guess it had been given to him or donated or whatever. But he turned it into a little place where Westerners could go to kind of be kind of on their own, because he realized the Japanese tradition didn't always fit what what the Westerners were looking for. But we did lots and lots of zazen at that temple. And the other thing we did was recite this sutra every morning. So I recited it every morning for 7 months. And so it's got a special place in my heart in Zen Buddhism. And I do remember, I believe this is the text where in the particular translation that we were using, and I don't know, I might have the little copy. It was just a little booklet. Maybe I have it buried away somewhere in a box, but it was 40 years ago. So anyway, I'm not sure if I still have it or not. But anyway, there was a line that said, and you referred to it, but it's not the same translation. But this line says, the acquiescent mind realizes itself, and that somehow that line just grabbed me. And right now, while you were speaking, I looked up acquiescent because I thought, do I really know the meaning of what acquiescent means? And the dictionary said, the reluctant acceptance of something without protest. So I thought, well, I don't know if that's what I. But on the other hand, I'm kind of looking at it. Well, okay, it's kind of just the reluctant acceptance of stuff. We would like there to be more than what there is, but so we kind of just accept it without protesting. So anyway, I'm not sure if it's the right word or not because I've only seen it in one translation, and other translators use something quite different. But for me, that was a really important line for me, at least during that time. So anyway, thank you for your talk. I enjoyed particularly some of the historical stuff and also just your heartfelt reactions. But so thank you so much.
There's kind of a commentary that's kind of based on the text. It says it's necessary to extinguish biased views, but it's not necessary to pursue the truth. Because it's there. It's just there. And I did find this other translation of the kind of conclusion. Trust in the non-duality of mind. So that's the verb, trust in the non-duality of mind. Non-duality results from trust in mind. Trust in the non-duality of mind. Non-duality results from trust in mind. It's beyond words and speech.
Well, I can resonate very well with don't pursue the truth. That would be like a real downward spiral. So at least for me. So
yeah, which is why this idea of effortlessness is so important. It's like if you pursue stillness, all you're doing is creating turmoil. And it's how long did it take to figure that out? Oh, someone has their hand raised. Jushin. Oh, Jushin, go ahead.
I don't see him or hear him.
No, I didn't have my hand raised, but wonderful. I love this. This is one of my favorite poems.
I think
One of the 2 of the 16 translations that Reverend Angel provided, one is from Portland Zen Center and one is from Rochester Zen Center, where they do chant this in liturgy. So I would encourage Hokyoji. We don't have enough things to chant already.
I think we might be out of questions. Last chance, going once, going twice, going 3 times. All right. Ryushin, thank you so much. I really, really, really enjoyed the talk. I really appreciate what delving into what characters and pictures and cultures, how that is kind of the soil in which this particular teaching grew. So thank you so much for being so thorough. It made it particularly tasty. and I very much appreciated the meditation. So let me end by saying thank you, thank you, thank you.